I'm getting ready to carry on a project I actually started a while back that involves making partially dye-formed garden insects and small animals. I got fascinated with the die making when I built my hydraulic forging press, and that sort of changed my whole perspective on how fun that die making process was when you don't have to use a sledgehammer. And the power hammer never really worked for me. My hammers have enough bounce that it's pretty hard to get a good die impression, but it's really ideally suited for the hydraulic machine. Almost everybody's familiar with this traditional forged dragonfly form. We see this in a lot of blacksmith demonstrations, and that's something probably everybody ought to try for fun. But this is more of a process that's going to sort of mass produce things that are inexpensive, fairly crafty type things. But right now, with the economy and kind of a wreck, people are really in the mood for $10, $20, $30 items and not more expensive things. So we'll try to accommodate that a little bit. So these two pieces that I'm working on right now are the bodies for a small butterfly and a dragonfly. Both are approximately life size. First thing I did was make a positive. I don't seem to be able to find the positive I actually made for the dragonfly, but you can fuller a series of indentations, or this was actually made from a automobile valve that I just carved with a zip disc, I think. And you get the male form first, and then I proceeded directly to tool steel in this case because they're relatively small forms. I know the force on my press is going to be able to accomplish the impression probably in a single heat, even in tool steel. And I don't know what this material is exactly. It's something I collected years ago. Just through experience, I know it's extremely hard and very durable. A lot of short run dies I make out of mild steel. So yesterday, we made a single impression here. Then we made a single impression of the dragonfly in another piece of the same stock. And what I'll do on the next go around is make the corresponding half. We'll forge another half for the dragonfly, so we'll have a pair. And then when we put the stock in, we'll get a full round body, and the flesh will occur along the center line where it's pretty easy to remove, optimistically. We'll do the same for the butterfly body. That's a case where we use the machines to their unique advantage, do the die forming on the hydraulic forging press, and then when it comes to actually producing the object, we'll set it up for use under the power hammer, because that's repeated hammering action tends to give a nice planished effect to the finished object that the hydraulic forging press won't really do with a single or even a two-stage squeeze. Okay. So I have a good coal fire going now, and I'm going to continue on with the demonstration of the die making process for this dragonfly and little butterfly body. The blanks are a tool steel. Again, it's that very hard scrap. I don't know what it is, but I had some experience with it and I know it'll work well.
and it's come up to heat and it's soaking. So now we'll move over to the hydraulic press and squeeze this. Probably can get it as far as I need in one heat, maybe with a little bit of top pressure here and there. We'll clean that up a little bit with a butcher block brush. Looks like a good impression. Deep enough. So these will be the top and bottom halves. They'll require a little bit of dressing and aligning to get it exactly right, but it's getting nearer the point where we're going to be able to stamp out a full round dragonfly body. Alright, this is the butterfly body that I used to make the other half of the die. Again, it was just carved from a valve shaft, and it's blank tool steel piece has been soaking here, so it's ready to go over to the forging press. When there's such a small surface area involved, it really doesn't take much to really sink that positive down and create the negative space. So with a single heat, the job's done. So this is the one done the other day, and this is the one we did right now. And you can see that that's probably would make a little bit more than half a thing. Would end up with some extra flash, and that's where the dressing of the dies comes into play. Some of this lateral edge is going to have to be removed, and we're going to try to make a situation where we put our blank material in, it'll get fully filled and formed, and there'll be some lateral flash on both sides, but the thickness of that flash won't amount to very much, so it'll be easy to remove. I'm continuing with the die making process for the butterfly body and the dragonfly body. After I finished up with the sinking the female negative halves, I put them in a tumbler and took them out today. They look pretty good. I did a little bit of cleanup on the edges to relieve some of the extra mass, and welded them up as a pair. Now, when I made the original negative, I ended up with a lot of little scrap test pieces, and
it's handy when you're trying to mate the two dies to have something that's full round just to keep them lined up. So I took two of those half pieces of scrap, MIG welded them together, and then I was able to clamp this with a alligator jaw vice grip, holding the spring in place with it, and then it was an easy job to go ahead and MIG weld around the top and the bottom leaf of the spring. Then after that was completed, I just took a pry bar and opened up the die slightly to give me a little bit of clearance space so I can put the hot stock material in there. So now it's time to try it out. Same process was done with the butterfly. All right, put a little WD-40 on the hammer, lubricate the high-density polyethylene shims at least once a day. On. The dies aren't perfectly aligned. They're a little bit out of register side to side. Probably would be fairly easy to correct. We are getting the flash right along the midline and not too much, so it looks like that's going to be satisfactory with a little adjustment. So this was the first test to see what mass is going to be appropriate. Some 7/16 scrap, and it doesn't quite fill the large eyes. It's going to take at least ½ inch, or we might have to upset the end just a little bit to get a good fill. It's about right for the body. Wow, that came out really nice. That's ½ inch solid. The ½ inch, or actually would be probably ¼ inch too. It's a ½ inch approximately outside diameter. Tended to collapse too much, so it didn't get the feel of the eyes, but this worked really well. All right, this is where the die pair stands at this point. Got pretty good fill of the head. It would fill better if we didn't have this 1/8 inch flash on either side. We have a little bit greater height than we have width of the body. So what I would say needs to happen now is to heat the hairpin of the spring, open it up where I can get in with a grinding wheel
and take about a 1/16 of an inch off of the bottom die and take about a 1/16 of an inch off of the top die and then try it again. I'll probably just grind off this flash and use the same blank then for the next test. But as we get closer and closer, almost all the material is going to go into the form itself to be very little flash, and it should be simply a one heat process to get the form that we're looking for. The Dragonfly body die is still at a somewhat crude stage, but we're making progress. This was one of the test pieces that I made on the first attempt after I mated the top and bottom dies. And I could tell right away that it was too thick in the up-down plane compared to the side-to-side plane. So I had some time today. I took the torch, I heated up the hairpin of the spring, opened this up wide enough that I can get my angle grinder in here, and I removed part of the mass on either side of the cavity, on both the top and the bottom. And then the next step is I can just lay the positive form in here, heat with the torch again, and bring this top die back down to mate in a close register. And then when it's settled in and relaxed, I can just open it up a ½ inch or so, just enough to admit the working stock. I did that a bit purposefully to show what happens if you don't heat exactly on the original line. It won't close up symmetrically. So the top die is a little bit forward of the bottom die. So I can just move my heat up a little bit. And work it back. Now I can tell that I'm not in register at that point. Well, I should be able to get pretty close. Another trick is to just get a clamp, C-clamp or long jaw alligator clamp like this. Where I can lock that in position and when I apply the heat, it's going to try to seep. The box. Well, it should be pretty relaxed. Feels like it's about right. I've opened it up enough just to get the stock in. I'll let that cool. I don't usually quench it. And we'll test it, and if it needs a little bit of adjustment here or there, we'll do that. If this is going to be a long run die and it requires long-term close register, I'd probably take the torch and trim out the top die and build up a wall on the bottom die so that it was a one-way fit with a very close registration guaranteed.